Las Vegas. It's more than just a city. It's a feeling. It's that feeling of excitement when you spot the lights of the strip out the airplane window. It's that feeling of awe as you stroll down the boulevard, taking in the sights and sounds. And it's that feeling of satisfaction, knowing that you're in the greatest city in the world. Over 42 million people from around the world share that feeling every year. And I'm one of them. Taking you to the world-famous Vegas Strip and beyond, my name is Jeff. And this is Jeff Does Vegas. March 31st, 1985 is often regarded as a red-letter day in the history of professional wrestling. It was on that date that the WWF hosted the very first ever Wrestlemania at Madison Square Garden in New York City. A little over 19,000 people were in attendance for that first event, and just over 1 million people across the U.S. watched it via closed-circuit pay-per-view television. 9 years after launching what would eventually go on to become the longest-running and most successful professional wrestling event in the world, the WWF decided to take a gamble on Las Vegas, more specifically, Caesar's Palace, where they intended to host the most opulent Wrestlemania in history, complete with elephants, camels, gladiators, chariots, and even an appearance from Cleopatra and Julius Caesar themselves. However, despite all of that opulence, WrestleMania 9 is often regarded as being, quote, the worst WrestleMania in history. Why? Well, my guest for this episode of the podcast is here to help us break down all the reasons. Mark Hoke is the host of The Mark Hoke Show, the #1 rated professional wrestling radio show in Las Vegas, heard every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific time on KDWN 101.5 FM. Mark and I went deep into WrestleMania 9, covering everything from the choice of venue to Bobby the Brain Heenan's memorable entrance to the controversial finish to the event. Please enjoy my conversation with Mark Hoke.
The first time that I saw wrestling, I was actually on my paper route, believe it or not. And I was collecting money from one of my customers, and I was in their home, and I saw on TV they were watching wrestling. And I was like, what is this? And, you know, they told, oh, it's WWF. I'm like, okay, what channel is it on? And it just went from there. It's really been kind of a love affair for my whole life. I had the Superstar Wrestling game. I don't know if you ever saw this, dice game from back in the 80s. You know, started picking up Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and then my station realized that wrestling was a pretty good ratings draw for them, so then they picked up World Class. They picked up Mid-Atlantic. Cable came out, and you know, got to see Florida, and then the AWA was on, and yeah, and I just kind of been an addict ever since.
It's funny how everybody kind of has that. I think everybody who's a wrestling fan has that kind of that moment in their lives. I know for me, I had a great uncle that we would go visit in the summertime, and he was, you know, at that point when I was a little kid, and he was in his 80s, and we would go there for Saturday lunch. And we could not get there before 11 o'clock because wrestling was on from 10 to 11.
Nice.
And if we showed up at 10:55 before Superstars was done, forget it.
Yeah.
That was the cardinal sin in the family. So like yourself, I mean, I kind of had that love affair as a kid. I remember getting the Superstars, the figures, the vinyl heavy figures that you could actually injure someone with. If you hit them with it. And I mean, same thing, saving up my allowance to buy WWF magazine and you know, just poring over the pages and wanting to call the Superstars line, but knowing my parents would murder me if I spent money on it. So everybody, I think, has that moment of you know, when it all kind of hits for them. How many live events have you attended? I mean, do you even have a number? Do you even know?
I probably couldn't give you a number. There was a while where I didn't go to too many live events, but when I was younger, the first one I went to, I was frequenting the Hershey Park Arena in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And first one I went to, I saw Sergeant Slaughter. who I just had on my show about a week ago. Gosh, who all was there? Boy, it was Adrian Dawson, Dick Murdoch, the Samoans. Jesse Ventura, no shows, of course. He was supposed to wrestle Ivan Putski. This was around, I don't know if you remember this, but this was around the Ivan Putski, Jesse Ventura arm wrestling fiasco that happened.
I do remember that, yeah.
So right around that time, I think I got to see Moolah and Wendy Richter that night, and boy, it just went from there. But I've gone to a ton of different events, and one great one at Baltimore, I was at the SmackDown where Zach Gowen got his leg ripped off.
Yeah,
I was actually in that corner too, and I saw Piper's face when he pulled the leg off, and it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. First time I saw the Big Show there too, and if you've never been near the Big Show, you don't know how big he really is.
Yeah,
he's a large, tall dude.
Yeah,
really large guy. And got to see Hogan that night, but I saw Hogan against Big John Studd a while back, and and then now that I've been out here in Vegas, I've been getting to a lot of events. Vegas has really become a wrestling hotbed between all the indies, and WWE is now frequenting here a lot. They didn't really used to come here for a long time because it just was more of a transient community.
Right.
So it wasn't a big draw for them, but now they've been coming. Double or Nothing is here with AEW, so that's an amazing, what a blast. I had that one. And now that I got to interview Tony Khan about a month ago, and now that happened, I cannot wait until this year's Double or Nothing, because I think it's going to be a pretty sensational weekend for the show. So
wrestling fans are some of the most passionate people I've ever met in my life. And it's always fun. I mean, I always tell people, even if you're not a wrestling fan, you should attend a pro wrestling event, because you are going to see the most passionate people in the world. I remember being at an event. It was a buddy of mine and I, and it was early 90s, late 80s, Winnipeg. It's very fuzzy. It was Winnipeg Arena, and it was a TV taping, and I had won tickets off of a radio station. And I remember being there, and there was an old lady about 20 rows back from my buddy and I at one point during the match, and she was in her 70s, and I heard her yell out, "Rip his freaking head off." And my buddy and I have never laughed so hard in our lives.
Oh, that's great. It's funny you mentioned about going for the first time, because other than doing the Mark Hoke Show here on KDWN, I also produce SportsX Radio here with Ken Thompson. Ken is 60, and he has never, until last week, been to a pro wrestling event. I took him to the Impact tapings that were going on, and Ken's just going nuts. He was loving it. Yeah, I'm for it. Hey, Jersey guy. I'm just looking at him like, oh, you're a wrestling virgin. But it's okay. It was great because we worked together, and now he sees the passion that you're talking about. I was just at a Future Stars of Wrestling event at their facility, and there's this girl next to me with, it was probably about like 12, signs, screaming, saying things that I'm surprised her mother let her say. got a dude over here, rather large gentleman with a family and like a baby in his arms, screaming at wrestlers. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the way it is. And, it's funny. I just had Baby Doll on the show about a month ago. And we were talking a little bit about the riot that happened at the Omni back when Rick turned on Dusty in the cage, and all the horsemen were in the cage, and everybody was basically trying to kill them.
Yeah.
It's not quite that nuts anymore, but the passion that everybody does have is still there. And I think that, when you tell a good story, you have great characters, and people get pulled in. It's like a live movie, and you get to see all this happen in real time, and it's just amazing to watch. And when it's done right, gosh, it just pulls you in. I mean, like what's going on with the Bloodline right now is an example. The world is just captivated by this storyline right now, or what just happened at Double or Nothing on Sunday night with MJF and Bryan Danielson. One of the greatest matches I've ever seen, and the crowd was just eating it up. And I was watching in a movie theater with everybody who was there, and we're just all going crazy in there too. I mean, it's amazing what happens when you watch pro wrestling, and you really appreciate what everybody's doing in there. And it's just you can see I'm kind of grinning right now thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's why I do a pro wrestling radio show, because I was asked what kind of show you want to do, and said, well, I don't really want to do politics, but I'm not sure. So we'll do something you love. And there I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of, it translates, it really does.
It's funny that you mentioned about telling a good story, because I know you'd get people that would give you shit about watching wrestling. How can you watch that? And I'd look at them and I go, okay, well, what do you watch? Well, I watch whatever, Days of Our Lives. Okay, well, how can you watch that crap? You know it's predetermined. You know what's happening. You know it's quote unquote not real. How is that any different from what I'm watching, except the guys that I'm watching are hitting each other over the head with chairs and cookie sheets, and your people are pretending to be possessed by the devil. So
are you talking about the Marlena storyline?
I am talking about the Marlena
God.
storyline.
I gotta admit, when I was younger and then a little bit in college, I did watch Days of Our Lives, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I got sucked in by the Marlena story.
It's okay. I thought it was weird. I just thought Marlena was hot, but Deidre Hall is a beautiful woman.
You talked a little bit about how you got into hosting a pro wrestling radio show and a pro wrestling podcast. Was it just a case of you were here and there, again, like you say, like, what kind of show do you want to do? I want to do this because it's something I love.
Yeah, I did a poker wrestling. Now that would be interesting. A poker.
That.
I'm gonna make some phone calls.
Yeah.
I got it first though, but
we'll split it. We'll split it.
We'll do a split.
Yeah.
But I used to do a poker radio show for a very long time, and I traveled all over North America doing that. And unfortunately, some personal stuff happened with my wife leaving, and I raised my daughter alone, and so I kind of had to step back from that. And then I got pulled back into doing radio again. And I was at actually at another station here in Las Vegas. Well, I was actually on the station, but a different company. It was a bizarre story that happened. But like I said, my program director, I said, look, I think I really want to get back on the air again. And when he asked me, well, what do you want to do? And we're a talk radio show or talk radio station. And I was just like, I just don't want the pressure of doing the politics. And, in sports, Ken's already doing a sports show. I want to do something. I want to do something different. And the program director, a longtime guy, I'd known him for 20 some years, said to me, what do you love? What are you passionate about? And what's going to draw people in that's not something that's being done here in Las Vegas? And boom, said, you know what, let's give this a shot. Let's do pro wrestling. Yeah. And he absolutely loved the idea. And then unfortunately he got let go on a salary dump, and the next PD comes in, and I was like 1 week into my show. Yeah. And I hadn't really known him that well. He worked in the building, but I didn't know him. And he's like, so you're doing a pro wrestling show? I'm like, yeah. He's kind of looking at me like, okay. And I won him over in a couple of weeks because, I just enjoy it so much. And it's really turned into something pretty spectacular. The ratings have been great. People are, it's on Sunday morning at 8:00 Pacific time until 10, and people are tuning in. And it's pretty amazing to me when I think about that, just locally on the ratings, you see that people are willing to take the time to get up in the morning and turn on a pro wrestling show when they could be doing a million things. I laugh sometimes because when I beat Jesus in the ratings, it blows me away. We've actually, when the ratings come out and we hit the books, we're usually pretty much every time we beat all the other talk radio stations in town.
Yeah.
Which is, and it's not a brag. It's just something it blows me away when I think about that it's a Sunday morning pro wrestling show, and here we are.
Yeah.
And, now we just had, like I said, we've had some pretty good guests, Booker T, B. Brian Blair, and some other ones, but Tony Khan came on the show about 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And the interview went absolutely viral all over the planet. And now, my God, it has been nonstop, which is exciting. It is so much fun. And I get to do something that I really am into and I can have fun with.
Yeah.
Just had a great time with Sergeant Slaughter here this last weekend, and had him on the show, and, boyhood hero.
Yeah.
Got to meet him, and, and that's kind of one of the fun parts about this too, is that I'm getting to talk to people that I grew up watching, or, my daughter and I are watching on TV right now. And it's like a fantasy. I mean, my God, I'm getting to talk to people that I never in my life thought I'd get to talk to. So it's a blast.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, by the way, just so I get this in, we're on KDWN 101.5 FM in Las Vegas. You can go to KDWN.com or worldwide on the Odyssey app. That's right, kids, the Odyssey app. So make sure you guys download that in Canada. We'll be watching.
And you're also, you run the show as a podcast as well. That it does get released as a podcast each week as well.
Yeah, that is available at most of your favorite podcast outlets. Main one that I have it on is markhokeshow.podbean.com. But it's out there everywhere.
Do you have a favorite era of wrestling, or a favorite company? Are you more of a WWF guy versus WCW guy? Are you an Attitude Era fan? Are you more the 80s, 90s stuff?
You're gonna get me in trouble.
A little of all of it.
When I first started, obviously I watched WWF. That was what was on TV.
Yeah.
And then I found the NWA, and getting to see Ric Flair and the Four Horsemen and so on. I really enjoyed that style of wrestling, maybe a little bit better than the cartoony stuff in WWE, but I was a huge Hulkamaniac.
Yeah.
So I more appreciated, I think because I was an athlete, I appreciated the athleticism in both. I mean, you put a gun to my head, I don't know. I don't think I could pick. But then, obviously, you get to the Monday Night Wars, and being a Hulk Hogan fan, man, the NWO was special. I mean, I had a Hulkamania T-shirt, and I probably hadn't bought another wrestling T-shirt until an NWO T-shirt.
Yeah.
That was an amazing time. I liked some of the stuff in the Attitude Era. Some of it I didn't, just because I thought it was a little bit cheesy at times. But you had some incredible talent there too, and great matches. And I think that's what it always has come down to me is, do I get a good story, and when I watch, am I going to enjoy a match and get pulled into it?
Yeah.
And and in that era, both companies did things that were great, and they both did stuff that I just wanted to say, can I refund this time of my life?
Right.
Please, for the love of God. But I think now we're in what's really a golden age of wrestling. I really believe that. I think WWE, as good as they are, as good as their performances are, creatively were really lacking.
Yeah.
And there just wasn't anything that would pull me in. So I wasn't consistently watching a lot of the programming. I'll DVR it and zing through stuff and see what I want to see. Then AEW came out, and I saw what Tony Khan was trying to do with AEW, that it's more wrestling oriented. Did they do some cheesy stuff? Yes, but not to the extent that WWE was doing. So, I'm just like, my God, AEW is great. I love this. And even though they struggled and they had some people on there maybe they shouldn't have, still, to me, was a great step forward in bringing that NWA type stuff back to the wrestling scene.
Yeah.
And now you see with WWE and Triple H hopefully still taking over, that they have gotten more wrestling oriented, and the two of them, while I don't think they're truly competing yet, I think that WWE saw, wow, these people are really paying attention to AEW. What are they doing that we're not?
Mm-hmm.
And now they're trying to do it better than what AEW does. And I think it's made for some great content for everybody on
Mm-hmm.
both shows. Plus now, Ring of Honor's back with them. They're finally getting footing there, and you're seeing other promotions too. You've got you've got the NWA out there. You've got MLW, Impact. I mean, Impact really. I got to spend some time with those guys and interviewed a few of their people when they were just here in Las Vegas and went to some of the shows, and they have really turned that product around.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just amazing when you look around. I mean, even the indie scene here in Las Vegas is incredible. I do the work with Future Stars of Wrestling, which to me is the best one, by a lot.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of other good products here too.
Mm-hmm.
But even those shows have raised the bar for the independents.
Yeah.
Around too. I mean, it's fascinating to see what's happening in wrestling right now, and I'm just like, oh, there's great matches everywhere. This is awesome.
Yeah.
So, I just enjoy seeing people do it right, and from the bottom up, I think a lot of people are doing it right now, and it's a pleasure to be a wrestling fan today.
Well, there's a lot of debate surrounding WrestleMania 9 and whether or not it was done right. So I wanted to. Here's how I kind of wanted to do it. I want to talk a little bit about what the WWF was going through at that time, and then let's break down some matches.
Sure.
And we'll compare notes, because I finally, for the first time in a very long time, sat down and watched the event last week, and top to bottom sat through the entire thing, which, I mean, some would say, why would you do that to yourself? I actually really kind of enjoyed it. I'm sad to say, but I mean, it was WrestleMania 9. It was April 4th, 1993. It was Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, the world's largest toga party. It was the first ever outdoor WrestleMania, 16,000 in attendance, which was a little rough because the year before was considerably a larger audience.
Yeah.
That was a really rough time for the WWF at that point. I mean, they were, it was just kind of after all the steroid allegations, and there was a lot of flux in talent, and attendance was down. That was a tough time for the WWF.
Yeah, it was. And you saw at that time they had just managed to add some new talent in there too. They were shaky there for like around WrestleMania. WrestleMania 8, 9 was a little bit rough. Mm-hmm. They pulled it together at 10, obviously.
Yeah.
Because 10 was amazing. Mm-hmm. But I think they were still kind of trying to figure things out, and, which way do we want to go? Do we want to go a Bret Hart type way, a Shawn Michaels type way, or do we stay in the world of Hulkamania? And you could tell that they honestly hadn't made up their minds at that point.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, kids.
Because it was WrestleMania 9 was weird.
Yeah.
The outdoor venue was good and bad. Obviously you say Caesar's Palace, and especially back 30 years ago, you're the fight capital of the world, and that's where a lot of the big fights happen, at Caesar's Palace. You say that name and you think big fight feel.
Yeah.
And so I think that was part of what they were going for on that. It was funny when when I went back and watched, I'll be honest, I didn't watch every minute, but when I did watch, you kind of saw the setting, and it was okay.
Yeah.
But, you're doing outdoors in Las Vegas, and the one thing about doing outdoors events in Las Vegas is it gets windy here.
Yes, especially that time of the year.
And
yeah.
you can kind of see it at points.
Yeah.
That the wind was just whipping through, but the crowd was pretty hot.
Yeah.
It wasn't a huge crowd like you would expect at a WrestleMania today, but they were still pretty fired up, mm-hmm. which was good to see for the event. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting setting for WrestleMania.
And as you say, it was a weird time because they were in that weird state of flux where they were they were bringing in, again, you had Shawn Michaels and you had Bret Hart at that event, but you also had Hulk Hogan, a considerably smaller Hulk Hogan. Obviously, this was post steroid allegations, so you kind of wonder if maybe they were, hey, Hulkster, lay off the bodybuilding a little bit, just a touch. We want to make it not look so much like that. Maybe even if he was clean, it was like just maybe a little bit. But yeah, very different time for the WWF.
Yeah, and it's funny, like when you look down at this card, you can kind of see how they were trying to decide what they wanted to be. I mean, you look at people on the card. You still had Tito Santana, but I forgot Bob Backlund was on this card.
Me too.
I actually went to North Dakota State, and Bob Backlund was a national champion wrestler in North Dakota State.
Okay, yeah.
Division II. So I'd go into the wrestling room and I'd see his name on the wall and everything. But you had him. You had guys like Ted DiBiase were on there. You had Luger and Perfect, even though Luger was doing his narcissist thing.
Yeah.
And then you got Bret Hart, but then you've also got Papa Shango.
Yeah.
You got the Head Shrinkers, which were a serious team, but still a real character, carrying on the Samoan line.
Yeah.
Crush.
Yeah.
Doink. Erwin R. Shyster. You took Mike Rotunda and you turned him into the tax man,
the world's most dangerous accountant.
Yeah. Giant Gonzalez is on the card, and of course the Undertaker is kind of the one that crosses the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it was a weird mix of serious top flight technical wrestlers and your ultimate cheeseballs of WWE.
So let's dive into the matches. So the first match that gets televised in the event is Tatanka and Shawn Michaels. This was a big event, featured the WWF debut of Luna Vachon, which, I mean, Luna was such a great character and was such a bizarre character to watch, but coming from such wrestling royalty. She's there with Shawn Michaels as his valet. Sensational Sherry comes out ringside because she's got a feud with Shawn Michaels, but she's supporting Tatanka. 18 minutes the match ran. Tatanka gets it by count out, which was a little disappointing to see. But I mean, it was a really athletic match. There was lots of great high spots. It moved. It didn't feel like an 18-minute long match.
No, it did not.
My personal rating, I gave it a 3 out of 5. I took points away for the count out because I thought, it's a terrible way to end a match and kind of boring.
Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking the whole night, because there were a lot of inconclusive and weird finishes in the whole WrestleMania. So that kind of set the pace a little bit. But I do agree with you. I mean, that was the peak of Tatanka. Chris Chavez, I remember when he was wrestling in the NWA, and was really excited when he came into WWE and they did the Tatanka thing and had the undefeated roll and all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty solid match, and it was interesting, the combination of Luna Vachon and Shawn Michaels. I mean, Luna was not your typical WWE lady.
No.
To say the least. And I questioned that pairing a little bit, but it worked.
Yeah.
For what they were trying to do. It was a good match. I'm not going to call it a great one, but it was solid, definitely. I mean, it's Shawn Michaels, so it can't be totally bad.
No.
but yeah, the finish was a little disappointing.
Yeah. Steiner Brothers and the Head Shrinkers.
Now here we go. Now we're talking.
First WrestleMania for the Steiners. When I watched the telecast, I noted JR's first use of the word slobber knocker on WWF television. I'm assuming so, because this was his commentary debut, and of course slobber knocker kind of became a bit of a trademark phrase for him. It's going to be a knockdown, dragged out slobber knocker of a match. He drops it in. Bobby Heenan, guy cracks me up, comes in. That's what they call the waitresses at the Tip Top Cafe in Tulsa. Heenan kills me. Steiners pick it up by pinfall. I forgot how great the Head Shrinkers were to watch.
Yeah. Such
an amazing tag team to watch. The Steiners, incredibly athletic, of course. I mean, being their background and where they were. Some great reversals, lots of action. I gave it a 4 out of 5 on that.
Yeah, I would put it there too. That was, to me, that might have been the match of the night, to be honest with you. I was always a fan of that. Like the Samoan SWAT team and all those iterations of the Samoan teams. And those guys, and having Afa there really helped them out a lot. It gave some legitimacy to those guys. And, you had some amazing athleticism out of that match. I mean, the Steiners are the Steiners.
Yeah.
I mean, they were so special to watch. And, yeah, like I said, I think it might have been the best match of the night. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, unfortunately, I got to say 4-ball, but, yeah, still a pretty good match.
Yeah.
Really good match.
Next up, Doink the Clown and Crush. I'm not going to lie. I found this match fun to watch.
It was, yeah.
There's some nostalgia there watching Doink doing the whole evil clown gimmick, that whole thing. This was the match with the double Doink.
Yes.
We had the ref bump. Ref's KO'd. Second Doink comes out from underneath the ring. I feel bad for that guy hiding under the ring for as long as he had to. Hits Crush with the loaded prosthetic arm, knocks him out. Ref wakes up. Doink pins him. That's it. You're going to hate me for this because I gave this match a 5 out of 5.
Wow.
I thought it was just a fun match to watch. And I gave bonus points to the dude who had to hide under the ring both
and I'm trying to remember,
the entire event.
And I'm trying to remember who the other Doink was because there were about 4 or 5. I mean, Matt Bourne was the primary Doink.
Yes. Yeah.
But I know like Steve Lombardi played him in a couple of guys. But I can't remember who the other Doink was.
No, I'm not sure.
But it was Doinky. For what it was, it was okay.
Yeah.
I guess. See, I guess part of me when Matt Bourne came to the WWF, I had known about him in Portland, and I was like, man, I can't wait to see what they do with Matt Bourne. And they turned him into a clown.
Yeah.
And that's part of the serious wrestling fan in me saying, yeah, that I was just never that big on the whole Doink thing in the first place. So maybe my personal bias kind of puts it in the 2 to 3-ish range. For what it was okay.
Next up, Razor Ramon, the bad guy, and Bob Backlund. First off, R.I.P. Scott Hall. I mean, Scott Hall, this was peak Razor Ramon at this point. I mean, he's got the greasy hair. He's got the toothpick. He's giving glares to the fans. He's coming out. He's doing Scott Hall. It was such a sad ending for Scott Hall.
Yeah.
I mean, he had turned himself around and really seemed to be doing well. So it's fun to watch his matches. I mean, he was such a great, that Razor Ramon character was such a great character.
Absolutely.
And so again, to watch that, this was Backlund's first WrestleMania. This match though, this felt like a time filler. I mean, this was a 4-minute long match and just boring. Nothing happened. I gave it a 2 out of 5.
Yeah, and I hate to say that about Bob Backlund, but what struck me, and like I said, I had forgotten about this match, that Backlund was on this card, and I actually watched a couple promos that I found that were leading up to this, and I'm just like, this guy was the WWF champion for 6 years.
Yeah,
and it's nothing against Bob. He's a great wrestler. I would love to talk to Bob Backlund.
Yeah.
But seeing the two of them in the ring together, man, it was just like a throwback to the 70s days of wrestling to a more modern, exciting style.
Yeah.
And yeah, the match was, I mean, Bob got some good offense in.
Yes.
But it just wasn't there. And, and it had a kind of there was a roll-up finish, and I'm like, okay. Well, that's nice. You would have thought the bad guy would have done something to Howdy Doody that would have been really bad and made everybody upset. But one thing that really struck me on this match too, by the way, was people were cheering for Razor.
Yes.
It's like, man, boy, what happened to Bob Backlund? But
he was Razor should have been the heel in this match, really.
Yeah,
and
it didn't happen.
As you say, it was almost like it was because Bob Backlund, it was like they sucked him out of the AWA in 1977 and stuck him in 1993 in this match with Razor. And as you say, it was just a character versus a guy with no character. Maybe that's too harsh. I don't know.
Oh, Bob was never known for his great promos, but the man could work. But this was, it was a little,
yeah.
So I'm with you on your rating.
Next up, this is a tough one.
Oh,
the Megamaniacs, Hulk Hogan and Brutus the Barber Beefcake taking on Money Inc., Ted DiBiase, and IRS, who were the tag champs. Now, this is a match that had a lot of backstory and a lot of controversy, but not necessarily in-ring controversy. Of course, the biggest story of the match was Hulk Hogan's face.
Yeah.
He comes out to the ring, and it was shocking. This black eye that he had, it was shocking to see his face when he made the entrance to the ring.
So what do you believe on that story, by the way? There's two stories. That two main stories that happened.
Yeah.
The one that Hogan told, the one that other people have suggested.
So, I mean, I tend to believe, based on the stories that I've heard and things that I've read, I tend to believe the story that he was punched out by Randy Savage.
Okay.
That's the story that I tend to believe. I think the jet ski story is bullshit. I really do, because my understanding was that was right around the time Randy and Elizabeth were having some marital issues. Yeah. Liz took off and went to Hogan's place, right, and stayed with Linda and Hogan's family, and nobody told Randy. Randy found out, and the story I heard was Randy got pissed off and punched Hogan right in the face. That was the story that I have heard, and that's the story I tend to believe. You?
I am a true Hulkamaniac. So I believe Hulk Hogan when he said he got hit with a jet ski. And I'll just leave it there.
I just, and of course, what kind of sold it for me with what sold it for me with the Randy Savage story to a degree was in watching this event, and Savage is doing commentary for this event as an aside, and he made a few little remarks through the commentary that just seemed to kind of fly under the radar, that weren't commented on by either Heenan or JR. And it was just kind of like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what sells it for me.
Something went down.
Yeah.
Something went down. But
yeah.
But I remember that too, because, I mean, the one thing about the Hogan eye situation is when you think of Hulk Hogan, he's the immortal superhero.
Yeah.
And he shows up at WrestleMania looking like someone smashed him on the side of a head with a shovel. Mm-hmm. With the extra striping of bandages and the eyes swollen, swollen shut.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, it's it kind of symbolized this WrestleMania actually. kind of you got a Greek Adonis with a black eye.
Yeah.
But that was very odd to me to watch. And honestly, I think it took away a little bit from everything that happened that involved Hogan that night. Mm-hmm. To me, I mean, so
well, and they spun it well on the show.
Yeah,
I mean, they had DiBiase and IRS do the promo saying, "Oh, we had Hogan got ran into some problems coming home from the gym last night," and so they spun it that he got beating the snot out of him coming out of the gym afterwards, or as Heenan at one point said, "Oh, maybe he dropped a weight on his face or something." As I said earlier, Hogan looked much less muscular in this particular event. He had just come back. It was February '93 that he had come back to WWF, so it was just a few months before this. The match itself, I mean, there's a ref bump. DiBiase and IRS are both down. Jimmy Hart, I love the Mouth of the South. Jimmy Hart, still one of my favorite characters.
Great guy.
WWF all time.
You ever met him?
No, never had a chance to meet him.
I have a great Jimmy Hart story. Do you want the Jimmy Hart story?
Yeah, hit me with it.
So I was covering a poker event in Daytona Beach, and Jimmy was, I don't know if he was running the bar or the whole hotel, but he had a bar down in this hotel in Daytona. And I'd heard about it. I'm like, oh man, I got to go over and check this out. So I go over. It's got all this memorabilia all over the place, and just fantastic. And the guy who's running the bar at the time said, "Hey, you're coming back tonight?" Like, well, what's going on tonight? Well, Jimmy's going to be here. We're watching Monday Night Raw. like, I'm off tonight.
Yeah.
I will see you later this evening. And I come back and I, got some photos with Jimmy and everything. And he and I actually sat together after we got to talking for a while. We sat together and watched that episode of Monday Night Raw. And what an amazing, I got to pick his brain a little bit. I was asking him questions and actually learned a little bit about show business from Jimmy Hart. It was an amazing experience for me.
No doubt.
Oh my God.
I love that kind of stuff.
He's a great guy
stuff
too.
Happens. Yeah.
He really didn't, I hate, I don't want to sound like I'm brown nosing everybody, but he a really, really nice, generous kind of dude. And just had a blast getting to watch wrestling with Jimmy Hart.
That's so cool. For me as a Canadian, that would be like watching a hockey game with Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah, it was something else. Absolutely.
Jimmy tried to be generous in this match, flips his jacket around.
Yeah.
Of course, it's striped like a ref shirt, because why wouldn't it be?
Sure. Because you wear that around all the time.
Exactly. He tries to 3 count both members of Money Inc. Of course, it doesn't count. Money Inc. wins by a disqualification. I gave the match a 3 out of 5. Now, it was not a good match. I mean, it really was a bad match, but lots of nostalgia in this match, and the crowd was popping like crazy for this match. I mean, it's Hogan. Of course they're popping.
I remember when this match got announced, I was like, even though I wasn't the biggest Bruce Bucake fan, I'm like, this is going to be cool. Hogan's going to win tag titles tonight. He's going to win a tag team title.
Yeah.
Man, I can't wait for this. And he's wrestling Mike Rotunda. He's wrestling Ted DiBiase. This is going to be a blast. And honestly, I thought the match sucked.
Yeah.
I was so disappointed. The bad finish, and just, and you get it's a DQ, and not only did they get a DQ finish, but Hogan and Beefcake lost, and I'm like, no, this is not right. So I'm in the 2 range on this, as much as I hate to say it.
Yeah.
I was, and maybe that's just being a crushed Hulkamaniac. I don't know.
Next up to the ring, Lex Luger and Mr. Perfect. I mean, this was Luger's first WrestleMania. He's still wrestling as the narcissist at this point, shortly after his debut in WWF. This was a good match. There was a lot of good technical wrestling to start. Then it kind of just turns into an all-out wrestling match, which was fun. Luger wins it by pinfall. Even though Perfect's feet are on the ropes, he still gets the count. Ref misses that. Spills out into the backstage afterwards. Perfect and Luger get into it backstage. Shawn Michaels gets involved. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. I mean, considering who was in this match, it was a okay match, if that makes sense. It wasn't a great match. You're 2 really good wrestlers, I thought, and 2 good personalities, but it wasn't awesome.
It showed still a little bit of... People forget that Lex was still somewhat green at this time. Mm-hmm. I mean, he'd been around for a while, but not that long. And when you're getting in the ring with Kurt, you better be really, really good. I was a little... I mean, the finish to me was pretty poor, just because if you haven't seen Kurt's feet, Lex has him rolled up, and both of Kurt's feet are curled up, draped over the rope, and somehow the ref doesn't see it, and I think Jim Ross yelled, "The ref didn't see it." I'm like, my grandmother saw it. That person that's up there by the fireworks up at Caesar's Palace in the top row saw it.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But but otherwise it was a decent match. So I would never give Kurt Hennig a 2-star match. So I'll give him a 3.
Next up.
Yeah.
Undertaker versus Giant Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Gonzalez is a monster. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no denying this. He's billed at 8 feet tall and 460 pounds, and he looks every inch of that 8 feet tall.
He was a good basketball player.
I'm sure he was an amazing basketball player. That doesn't necessarily translate into good wrestler, and that is obviously on display in this match, where he's wearing the full spandex bodysuit with the airbrushed muscles and an airbrushed fur, I guess. I
think there was fur attached. I think there was fur attached to parts of that thing. There was some airbrush and some rubber cement going on there. I don't know.
Undertaker, coolest entrance of the night for this event. I mean, he always has cool entrances, but I mean, he comes out, it's the green smoke, and he's on the funeral chariot with the big vulture on the perch. Looked incredible. Gonzalez, for being who he was, obviously as, not a good worker by any means, Undertaker really tried to make him look good in this match.
He tried.
Really tried.
He tried.
Really tried.
He tried. Just really, really, really tried.
Unfortunately, Taker with this match, he wins by disqualification after he gets taken out by a chloroform-soaked rag.
Yeah.
Which is made blatantly obvious by the commentators, who I'm guessing were directed to say it's a chloroform-soaked rag about 9,000 times so that people would understand why there was a rag going over Taker's face.
There had to be some mystical powers that should have been able to counteract that, wouldn't you have thought?
It's a chloroform-soaked rag. I can smell the chloroform. They can all smell the chloroform from 15 feet away. That's a lot of chloroform. Everyone in the whole front row should be going down at that point.
Pretty much, yeah.
This was terrible. I gave it a 2 out of 5, and the only reason I gave it 2 out of 5 was for Taker's cool entrance. Otherwise, this was the longest 7.5 minutes of my life.
It's unfortunately known as one of the worst WrestleMania matches of all time. And, I felt bad for Gonzalez because I remember he had actually, if I remember correctly, he'd actually started in the NWA in Mid-Atlantic and, with the WCW guys and stuff, and then went to WWE. And when I heard he was going there, like, oh, this will be interesting, see what WWE can do with this giant in the land of giants. And he had the suit, and I'm just like, what in the blue hell is this? And he just wasn't a good worker either. And you take that combination, and it just was a recipe for disaster. And I felt bad for the guy. I really did. Mm-hmm. And here's his WrestleMania moment with the Undertaker, and it just didn't go. I'll go a 1.5 stars for you.
Ooh,
because of the entrance, and it's the Undertaker, but it is gone down in history, unfortunately, as one of the worst debacles in WrestleMania history. So,
especially, I mean, Taker was one of those guys, or is one of those guys. You could throw him in the ring with a broom, and he'd make the broom look good. Mm-hmm. So for him to not really be able to make Giant Gonzalez look good is saying something about the ability. Yeah,
it just it's one of those things where you have a really tall athlete from another sport that just didn't have the physical skills to be a wrestler.
We're on to the main event now.
Yes,
this is the main event for the WWF Championship. Bret the Hitman Hart, my boy, the champ, taking on Yokozuna with Mr. Fuji in his corner as the challenger. This is another match that had a lot of controversy and a lot of backstory to it. We'll get to that in a second here. Two very different styles in this match. Obviously, you've got Bret Hart, who is an incredible technical wrestler. I mean, just absolutely amazing. As they've said, the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. Taking on Yokozuna, who is a sumo wrestler, smash style with Yokozuna. But they managed to mesh those two styles incredibly for this match.
They did. I mean, this was a terrific match. It still didn't quite hold. I think just because of how it wrapped up, I don't think it held up like the tag match, mm-hmm. With the Steiners and the Head Shrinkers. But it was still really a pretty amazing match. And one thing about Bret is, that guy could make a great match with anybody. And Yokozuna, was still, he put on more weight as he went along. but he was still at that point where he was physically able to do a lot of things in the ring that a guy that size shouldn't be able to do.
Yeah.
And I think with the Harts, especially, if you think about Yokozuna and just the respect that I think that the Hart family had for him, you know, not only did we go through this whole feud with Bret off and on, but then, you know, teaming with Owen Hart and making that work later on down the road too. I mean, that's phenomenal. That's really saying something about Yokozuna, and you know, and he showed it in this match. You know, once again, another really good lineage there with him too. And yeah, this was a blast until the end, but otherwise it was fun.
Bret gets the sharpshooter onto Yokozuna. You think that's going to be it? Nope. Mr. Fuji hits Bret with a handful of the sumo salt.
He's such a little jerk.
Yokozuna pins Bret Hart for the win and the belt. That's that. Yokozuna's the new champ. Again, this was a fun match to watch. I really enjoyed watching this match. I gave it a 5 out of 5. It was a legit 5 out of 5, in my opinion. I thought it was a great match.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still in the 4 just because I didn't like the ending, but
yeah.
But overall, it was a pretty good match. I'm a little tough on giving 5 stars.
Apparently,
unlike Dave Meltzer, you know, who just says, "Well, this was really going to give it a 7."
Yeah,
but it was a pretty a really good match, and you know, you give credit to Bret and Yokozuna for putting on a terrific show, and just wish the way things wrapped up at the end. It's still very controversial.
Well,
and we're going to get into it, I'm sure, but that was. You know, I just didn't like the whole salt, and you know, and this is what really drove me nuts at the end of it. Was it took Fuji forever to get that salt out and throw it.
Yes,
that was the one thing that really bugged me about it, because especially when I went back and watched it, I'm like, yeah, that should have been ready.
Yeah,
and you know, he kind of dug around for a while, and then woof, and once again, Dave Hebner. I think Hebner was Hebner the ref in that match. Or
I
was
think so. I think it was Hebner. Yeah.
You know, was in a position where he should have seen that, and I hate that.
Yeah,
I hate, you know, when there's a big cloud coming up, you know, and the guy's face is covered in white stuff, and you're just like, oh, hey, all right, girl, the front row is looking pretty good. Hey, can I get a beer? You know, come on.
Yeah.
So
it got weird after the match. Weird is like, I think weird is the understatement of the year on this one. So before this match happened, there was a promo, there was an interview, Mean Gene, Hulk Hogan, which I thought was very weird. When I'm watching, I'm like, oh, a Hulk Hogan promo prior to a Bret Hart Yokozuna championship match. Okay. Hogan issues the challenge during the promo and says, I'll take on whoever the winner is in this match. Okay. That's a little bit of weird foreshadowing. So, of course, after the match, Hogan comes out to help Bret. He's comforting Bret. Mr. Fuji gets on the mic, which, bless Mr. Fuji's heart, but this was not good on the mic. It was tough.
Yeah.
Challenges Hogan to a title match right here, right now. Hogan, of course, looks to Bret. Says, okay. It's okay, brother. Are you cool with this? Bret's like, yeah. Go, do it. Of course he's saying, go, do it. Yokozuna gets him from behind. He's got him kind of all tied up. Fuji tries to hit Hogan with the salt. Nope. Hogan ducks it. Of course he does. Yokozuna, he's blinded by the salt. Hogan hits him with the clothesline, the big boot, the leg drop.
Good game.
Hogan by pinfall. New champ. 0 out of 5 from me for this. Garbage. Absolute garbage, in my opinion. Trash. The worst thing I've ever seen.
Wow, a 0. I give it a 1.
Yeah.
Ish. Because I will say what I liked about it was Hogan. When Hogan came out, he's actually over top of Bret a couple times in the ring. He's helping him out, and Fuji's screaming at him, and Hogan's still taking him out of the ring, walking away. And then all of a sudden he says, "I'll challenge you for the title." And the one thing that I did like was Hogan was ignoring him and taking care of Bret for a while. So that seemed okay. But I can only, because, there's a lot of backstory behind that, supposedly, between Hogan and Hart, and Hogan not wanting to wrestle Bret. And I I even remember when I watched this that I was saying I love Hulk Hogan, it's great, but if I was Bret Hart, it'd be like, what the hell are you doing? No, don't do that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say go in the ring.
Yeah.
I want to get my title back.
Yeah.
So it was, but I actually thought Hogan played that fairly well. Given what he was asked to do. I thought Bret played it okay too. I mean, the actual match was, okay. You kind of saw it coming a mile away.
Yeah.
And Fuji was an idiot. So, yeah. So once again, I hate managers that are idiots. So, so it's in the 1.5-ish range. But I will say that at the end, the crowd went nuts.
Yes.
And it gave, the one thing that it did do was it gave everybody something to be happy about when they went home, because when you take a look at the whole picture of the card, you had Santana Shango pinfall match. Well, you had a Shawn Michaels held his title on the count out. What else do we have? We had a Doink the Clown match. We had a match with Backlund and Razor. You had a DQ loss for Hogan and Beefcake. A bad match with Undertaker and Gonzalez. You had a controversial finish with Luger and Perfect. So if you take that, if I would have gone, and then you would have had Bret losing this thing at the end, if everybody would have gone home saying, ugh.
Yeah.
This was not satisfying, fun. Right. It's like drinking a bush beer.
Yeah.
Right? You're Canadian. You drink Labatt's and Molson, I'm sure.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I get what I'm talking about.
Yes, I get what you're saying.
Like a Coors Light. So the finish. So what they did, at least, if they were going to make this move with getting the belt to Hogan some way or getting it off Bret, at least it gave everybody something to be excited about. And if you watch the crowd, they did really pop at the end of this thing.
Yeah.
So it at least gave everybody something to cheer about when they went home. Plus, then you're kind of wondering, well, now what's going to happen? Now Bret just lost the title, but Hogan got it. How's this all going to work?
Yeah.
So in the whole picture of it, it actually worked a little bit. But if you just take it in this little segment, it looks really bad. But I think in the picture of the card and then where they went, it actually did work a little bit.
All right, I'm going to up my rating to a 0.5 star.
Okay.
I'll take away my 0. I'll up it to a 0.5 star just simply for that.
Okay.
It was the politics of the whole thing and the stories. And again, there's so many stories and everything that floats around you. I love Bret Hart, but I feel like sometimes you got to take some of his stories with a grain of salt. There's so many different versions of every story floating around. And I mean, he told a version of the story in his book that, he got into Vegas and he got called to Vince's suite and he got told this was what was going to happen. And we're going to do this, but don't worry, man, we'll get the belt back on you. No time. It's just, this is going to be a temporary thing just so we can do this whole, get Hogan out. Hogan's on his way out anyways. So it's a farewell tour. I don't know. It felt so political and it felt like it was just that whole thing of, is it Bret Hart getting screwed early? Ahead of the Montreal screw job, what I mean?
I think, and once again, we kind of talked about the WWE being in flux at that time, and Bret was not typically the kind of guy that Vince wanted as champion. You think about, and actually, I just pulled this list up because I was curious to see it because I had to remind myself what happened right after that. But you're talking, the recent champions right around that era. Hogan, Andre the Giant won the belt for a brief amount of time. Savage, Ultimate Warrior, Sarge, Undertaker, and then Flair. Mostly bigger guys, big personalities. And now all of a sudden you get Bret Hart into this mix. And everybody loves Bret, but Bret is not the cartoony over the top superhero, supervillain kind of guy.
Right.
So I don't think Vince really ever knew what to do with Bret.
Yeah.
You know, you'd see conflicting numbers about TV ratings, but, you know, the merch sold and people popped for him and they loved him. But I always felt like to Vince there was just something that he just didn't feel right with Bret on top.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so these are the kind of things that would happen to him. You know, I mean, it's funny, and I'm just looking here right now because then when he won the belt back, then Bret won it at WrestleMania 10.
Yeah.
Even though he took the loss to Owen that night too, which was just that was an incredible match. But then all of a sudden, Bob Backlund, they do that feud with Backlund.
Yeah.
And Bret's out again.
Yeah.
And then Diesel gets the title and is sitting on the title forever. So it was a really interesting time with WWE trying to figure out what direction they wanted to take.
Mm-hmm.
And it showed, you know, sometimes in the ratings and everything else, and kind of laid the pathway for what ended up happening with the Monday Night Wars. So, you know, it's kind of where it all started, to be honest with you.
And kind of laid the pathway for the career of Bret, unfortunately, because, I mean, really not knowing what to do with him kind of sadly ended up being his legacy when he went over to WCW. And, I mean, again, taking it with a grain of salt in the stories that you hear in documentaries and from different people and different other wrestling podcasts that I've listened to. And they've said, you know, yeah, Bret, we told Bret, don't go to WCW because they won't know what to do with you over there. And that really kind of, to a certain degree, was the case. They never really did know what to do with him over there.
And I saw a couple documentaries about that, obviously, too. And it's really interesting with Bret that, you know, they put a great offer on the table for him, and it was a lot of money, hard to pass up. And to a point, you can't blame him because he knew it was probably going to secure him for life.
Yeah,
getting that contract, you know. But at the same time, I was really surprised he went because he just didn't seem like he would be a WCW guy. But I think he also felt like, well, if Vince can't decide what to do, and you know, Bret's legacy is so interesting. And I know we're getting a little off topic of WrestleMania, but Bret's legacy is so interesting when you think about it because he, to me, was always the tweener. You know, people loved him, but he wasn't the superhero. He was a great wrestler, but he wasn't that guy that you would think is going to go in and pound somebody into the ground or anything like that.
Yeah.
He was a true technician in the ring, and sometimes those guys are really, really hard to book. And even with Bret's personality, sometimes you'd see him do, when he's doing a babyface promo, you just felt like, you know, even though he's a good guy, you felt like there was just this mean part of him, you know, that was just waiting to come out. And him being a babyface sometimes just didn't seem to fit him real well. So it was a weird. He's one of the most interesting figures in pro wrestling history because, like I said, you put a Venn diagram up, and Bret's kind of right in the middle of it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me in an era where, you know, the cartoon heroes were still leading the way in the WWF that Bret kind of got put between two bricks.
Again, it really fascinating trajectory on his career and where he went with things. And yeah, I mean, that whole, again, the move to WCW, he was going into WCW kind of right at around the same time where WCW was blowing up with those bigger guys in the NWO. And you had you had those guys that, again, Bret was kind of like, well, he's not the big giant squash monster, and he's going in an era when maybe that, again, they just didn't know what to do with him in that case.
And Bret doesn't have that over the top personality that when you were going in WCW, when everything was happening, all those guys, all of them that did anything were completely over the top. Even guys, you know, a guy like Chris Jericho who's just getting rolling, still a really over the top personality. Yeah. And it just didn't seem to me like he was going to be a really good fit there, you know, and unfortunately, you know, the debut was really bad. And of course we all know what happened with Goldberg and so on. But, you know, he's, you know, you think about, you know, you start thinking about these guys' legacies after after this WrestleMania. You know, it was kind of the end of Hulkamania, and you got Randy Savage sitting on the sidelines because Hogan or Vince didn't think he had it anymore.
Yeah.
You know, which when we look back at, you know, it was ludicrous. You know, and you see you think about them where Lex Luger ended up. You know, he ended up getting buried.
Yeah.
You know, just this WrestleMania actually set up a lot of really bad things, some good things that happened, especially, you know, like a WrestleMania 10. But for the future, the next couple of years of WWE, it really showed some bad booking mistakes and some bad decisions that got made by WWE, whether intentional or not. It's you know, I hadn't really thought about it this way with WrestleMania 9, but yeah, it was a definite transition period for sure.
For me, I mean, the high points of this show, Bobby Heenan's color commentary. I mean, the Weasel was legendary.
Bobby's awesome. I miss him.
His commentary, I laugh. I go back and I watch some of those old events and I watch some of his old commentary, and some of it I laugh at I mean, he's saying stuff that you couldn't get away with saying on TV now, which made me laugh even more because it was inappropriate humor. And I just thought, like, man, he was so great. And again, he was just an excellent commentator, and he was so fast and he was so quick and just so much fun to listen to. And him and Savage playing off of each other at this event as well. Randy Savage, I mean, a lot of people don't think of him and the time that he spent working as a commentator, because, as you say, Vince didn't think he had it in the ring anymore, so he shuffled him off to do the commentary. But I mean, he was good at it as well. It was fun to watch and fun to listen to.
Yeah, they had a pretty interesting chemistry, and you know, you have Jim Ross in there getting to play the straight man with those guys. I couldn't imagine what that was like.
Right.
But you know, Bobby always had that incredible wit and he understood the business so well, and he was willing to do anything it took to get whomever over to make the moment just a little bit better. And you could, and one thing about Bobby too is people forget he was a pretty good wrestler.
Yeah.
When, you know, a lot of time in the AWA with Nick Bockwinkel and you know, some of the other guys over there, Bobby always was willing to make that sacrifice, but he also knew when to turn up that heat and make that moment. You know, I mean, you think about a moment like the Piper's Pit with Andre and Hogan, you know, which we just saw on the Rivals show that just aired. Bobby always just knew when to add that one little thing in.
Yeah.
You know, make that one little comment that just took it to another place. And Randy would just, you know, when he was doing commentary, you know, was a funny guy, and he would be able to find that one little spot where, you know, you just be like, oh, was that a jab or what? What did he just say? Oh, okay, that was good too.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, the commentary, underrated with Randy, and obviously had JR there too, and JR's still kind of find his place a little bit, but
yeah,
you know, but they were pretty good.
You mentioned Heenan being willing to do anything to make the show, and I mean, this was a great example on this. I mean, Randy comes in riding the sedan with the beautiful ladies, and they're feeding him grapes and throwing rose petals. Meanwhile, Heenan comes in wearing a toga, riding backwards on a camel. I mean, again, just that extra distance he was willing to go to make the show work.
Yeah. He didn't have to ride that thing backwards.
No, he didn't.
He could have still been funny going forward, but, you know, Bobby did that. And yeah, it was, you know, that whole opening segment of WrestleMania 9, you know, obviously way, way, way over the top, like stratosphere over the top, but still, you know, those guys kind of brought it back to wrestling.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, oh, here's Cleopatra and Julius Caesar coming out. So I'm like, who gives a damn?
Right? Yeah.
Really? Come on.
Yeah.
So then they come out and okay, we're back to normal here.
The big question for this event, who had the best mullet? Shawn Michaels, Razor Ramon, or Crush?
Oh, Crush still had the best mullet.
Yeah.
I think so. I think Crush definitely had the best mullet.
I'm putting that up as a Twitter poll on my Twitter.
Okay.
Who had the best mullet? I would say Crush was number one, with Shawn Michaels a very close number two in this era.
See, I never looked at Shawn as having a mullet. I just thought that was rebel long hair. Crush was a mullet. That was, I grew up in the 80s. That was a mullet. No question about it. And Razor's was, the slick back hair and all that. Man, it's still hard to believe that guy was Big Scott Hall in the AWA.
Yeah.
He looked like the Marlboro Man. Like, if you would have taken him and Magnum TA and made them a team,
yeah.
Dear Lord, they've been selling cigarettes for 20 more years,
Overall, I mean, again, this is often called the worst WrestleMania of all time. But even if that's the case, I still found it entertaining. Overall, with the whole show, I'd probably give it a 3 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm still overall in the 2 range on it because it just wasn't. In the moment, like I said, there were some good points, but just there were so many unsatisfying finishes to matches, and that's you wouldn't see that in a WrestleMania today.
No,
There's no way that all the countouts, the DQs, and everything else just would never happen. And the venue was a little shaky. There were so many flaws on this WrestleMania, and unfortunately, it's kind of why it went to the dustbin a little bit. And especially then you came back with WrestleMania 10, and woo, fixed that stuff up in a hurry, didn't they?
Mark, I appreciate this so much. This has been so much fun to sit and relive this with you. I'm glad we were able to get this happening. Once again, people want to find you online. They want to find the podcast and follow you on social media. How do they do that?
Well, you can go to markhokeshow.com. That's where we post everything going on with the show. So, with some of our great sponsors and everything. So you want to check that out. Twitter is at Mark Hoke Show. That's HOKE show. The Facebook is The Mark Hoke Show. That's pretty simple. YouTube channel is The Mark Hoke Show. Kind of got a trend there going.
Yeah.
And then if you want to find the podcast, markhokeshow.podbean.com. And, of course, it's out on all your favorite podcast outlets pretty much, so you can find it wherever's. And if you want to listen live, we're on KDWN 101.5 FM here in Las Vegas, and it is available worldwide live on the Odyssey app, AUDACY, but just search me out and you'll be okay, I promise.
Excellent, Mark. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. This is a blast.
And that wraps up another episode of Jeff Does Vegas. If you've got feedback on this episode of the show, or any other episode for that matter, or you've got suggestions and ideas for topics you'd like me to cover on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to me via Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Jeff Does Vegas. Or drop me an email directly at jeff@jeffdoesvegas.com. In the meantime, thank you so much for checking out the show. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you'll know the moment new episodes are available. And don't forget to visit jeffdoesvegas.com for past episodes and show notes. My name is Jeff, and this has been Jeff Does Vegas, a Walker New Media production.